Hello, and welcome to We Live for Saturday, your favorite college football podcast. I'm your co-host, Mike, and with me, as always, is your other co-host, John. John, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. Not too bad. I'm glad that it's going to be cool again. I had a fire last week or last night. Sorry
Nice.
for the first time. I built a new fire pit and I was able to use it because it finally got to temperatures where it felt good enough to sit out there, and it was beautiful. So that's great. Yeah, man. I mean, I'm just glad that fall weather seems to be here. I know Saturday's not supposed to feel like that, but you know what? It's creeping in, and I'll take what I can get. So, things are all right. How about you?
Absolutely. Things are going really well, I would say, and I did enjoy the brief bit of fall weather. But of course, it's back to being warm again, unseasonably warm, and it's going to be unseasonably warm for football this weekend, which is a little bit, like it's not that I hate all of my Gopher t-shirts, but like I have a whole Gopher wardrobe to show off here. I have in
Exactly.
between, you have your heavy hoodies for when it gets cold in November, and then
Yep.
you have your like in between long sleeves
Mm-hmm.
for when it's, still fallish and crisp, but
Mm-hmm.
like um but not, so hot anymore.
Yeah.
So, but I feel like we always just jump straight from it being really warm to being really cold. And we skip that whole thing in between where we have the nice crisp fall weather. And I
Yeah.
just I just hope that I just hope we get some of that this year for real.
I hope so too, man. It used to be that way all the time
Yes.
when you and I were kids. So it's not very enjoyable. And it's everywhere. I mean, it was like this. It was the same way out east, man. Even since like when I first moved to New York City in 2009, like there was actual fall, and in that period of time, it really switched. So
Yeah.
crazy. But here we are. We'll take what we can get. I think tomorrow it's supposed to be back down into the low to mid 60s, so that's great.
Yes. I'll take
It's like a
that
roller
for
coaster
sure.
this week, but yeah, man. So yeah, well, things are all right, but I wanted to touch just really quickly. Well, first off, let's just do a little business. I just wanted to let people know. If you want to find We Live for Saturday, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1G Sat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26. You can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher, and you can email us We Live for Saturday B1G at gmail.com. So, getting that out of the way, please first off follow, like, subscribe, all that. Cool. Now,
Yes.
I just wanted to briefly touch on. There's obviously we talked a little bit about this Big Ten SEC scheduling thing and like how they're meeting up and they're talking about reformatting, obviously future things for the college football playoff, whatnot, because they get to call the shots.
Yep.
But there's obviously these rumors are not dying out when it comes to the Super League, and it's scary, and I know that it's still a long shot or it's still a long ways off. It were to happen, but not long enough, in my opinion. God forbid it does happen in 10, 15 years. Frankly, I just don't want to be around for that. I don't want to deal with that. It would greatly decrease my interest in the sport in general if that were to happen, which would be really sad because I love college football and I love the way it is. I loved even more the way it was than I do now. But I'm still able to enjoy it now and find something to worthwhile in it, which is why we're doing this podcast, which is great. But it concerns me that this thing that like a lot of people kind of scoffed at and have kind of pushed off as this like absurd, ridiculous idea, which it is. Uh, just it won't die, and that causes me concern that it hasn't just kind of disappeared, or at least quieted down enough. That the fact that it's still being talked about amongst some important people who are, you know, in the know, I guess, and nobody's declaring that it's happening, but the fact that the idea is still being thrown out there, like, well, yeah, how could we make this work? Like maybe it is a good idea, and it's just insanity to me, and it would ruin the sport.
It's total insanity. And just so people understand, in a super league, basically what would happen is a handful of the biggest brands in college football would all leave their conferences and join a new league to just play each other pretty much.
Yep.
So you would take away all of the tradition and all of the history and all of the regional rivalries and all of the pageantry of college football would be like torn asunder as a handful of the top brands in the sport would make a desperate money grab to get an even bigger piece of the pie than they already get. And they already get the biggest pieces of the pie by a long shot.
Yeah.
By a long shot.
Yeah.
So I don't know. The question is like at what level, like what's the final level of human greed? And it turns out that it's pretty much unlimited.
Yep.
My hope is, and I've expressed this to you, my hope is that the commissioners of the Big Ten and the SEC realize to do a super league, they'd have to give up a lot of power. A lot of power. Yep. Most of their power. And are they really going to give up that much power for this much more money? And also, you think it's more money long term, but it probably isn't, because people are just going to stop watching.
Yeah.
Like if Minnesota, if the Big Ten still exists, but Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and USC and Oregon leave the Big Ten.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be interested in watching them and seeing what happens to them.
Not at all.
They'll be dead to me, period.
Yep.
I won't care at all about their games. I will watch the Gophers and whoever the Gophers are playing against in whatever the new Big Ten looks like.
Yep.
And I think that there are fans across the country who feel the same way. And you know what? Even fans who would stop watching their own teams because they're so sick of the traditions and the pageantry of college football being stripped away piece by piece, sold to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, and talking about too, like, and how they want to, some of these fans that are used to seeing their teams win 10, 11, 12 games, all of a sudden becoming 6-6 every year, or 7-5 at best, like that's the thing. Like
that's the other, if you're these second tier helmet schools, if you're Oklahoma or you're Penn State or you're USC or Oregon or you're, I'm trying to think in the SEC, who would you say? Someone like LSU?
Yeah.
Who's not Alabama or Georgia, but is
Florida.
Still Florida.
Even though Florida's been bad lately, but that's
but no, like that. Clemson.
Yeah.
Like the helmet schools that aren't the tippy top helmet schools right now.
Yep.
Yeah, all of a sudden your fans are going to abandon you en masse because Ohio State fans aren't conditioned to watch their team go 6-7-5. But Ohio State's not going to be going 7-5. It's going to be Michigan. It's going to be Oklahoma. It's going to be Florida. It's going to be LSU. It's going to be Penn State. It's going to be USC. Those are the teams that are going to be going in the new system, would be going 6-6, 5-7, God forbid.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So I don't think it's really in any, the reason why I think I'm a little like, yes, does this terrify me? Sure. But I'm a little less worried, I think, than you are, because I just think that those brands would be so unbelievably stupid to give up their whole place in the sport for like a little bit more hypothetical money that might not even exist because the fan base might not be there to the same extent it was before. Yeah,
no, I agree. I have the same feeling. I guess, like I said, what gives me pause is that this whole talk about it in a realistic way just hasn't really died off as much as I thought it would. And that, to me, the fact that it keeps, the resurgence of that conversation continues to come back every couple of months is like, well, what the hell here? Why is this still happening? Can we please just drop this? I'm not saying it won't happen eventually or whatever. Like maybe it will.
Let's hope it doesn't. Let's hope it doesn't, because that would truly ruin the sport.
I agree.
And you know what else? I would predict that it would not be that long before the Super League broke apart and those teams came crawling back to their conferences.
Yeah.
Begging to be brought back in because they wouldn't be getting the ratings and the money that they thought, and they wouldn't have the success that they wanted either.
Yep. Yeah, man, it would be a shame. A lot of these conferences, we already saw the Pac-12 go away with like 100 plus years of tradition there, that in history. And now the Big Ten, which is the oldest. And if that were to be destroyed, that would just be a tragedy on so many levels.
Yes.
with all the history that's there. SEC too,
Yeah.
and oddly enough, I do think it was like Greg Sankey said something either today or yesterday, and I think he's been the one. Now he says this. Does he mean it? I don't know. But I think he's been the one most, like, I guess you could say, outspoken against the Super League.
Good.
So at least somebody's saying something. Like I said, who knows behind closed doors? Maybe he's just like, yeah, I'm just saying this, BS just to, save face because, whatever, SEC wants that to be regional, which is fine. And I respect that. But maybe behind closed doors, money talks and he's moving along with it too. But I don't know. At least he's saying something, or someone is saying something with that can, sway some people hopefully in the right direction and with some sanity. But
Yeah.
anyways, that's all. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, way to get it off on a happy note, John.
Write your
Woohoo!
administration, write your ADs, write to the administration, tell them
Yeah.
you are not interested in the Super League. Please don't ever let this happen.
Yeah, do that. I'm gonna shoot an email to an AD. It means nothing. And yeah, the underlings will be the ones reading them, but if they get enough of them, they'll report to the AD.
Yeah.
If they get enough emails, they'll be like, hey, this is a concern our fans are having.
Yep. Cool. All right.
Fun.
Onwards and upwards. nowhere but up from here. Nowhere else but up from here, Mike. That's it. We're going on up now, so it's gonna be good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else you want to talk about before we start previewing week 6? John, it's already week 6.
Isn't that nuts?
It's crazy.
Crazy. Dude.
I feel like we just started. I feel like it was just opening day.
Ugh. It's nuts, man. I don't like it. I'm not a fan that it goes by so fast.
It always does.
Yeah,
every year.
Does. Yep.
But we're right in the middle of it, and it's fun while you're in the middle of it. And plus, we have the double bye this year, so we get one extra week of college football, so that's exciting.
True.
That means you can focus that much more on each game because they're spread out a little more.
That's true. That is true. That's not. I actually kind of appreciate that. So
yeah, so that aspect of it is cool.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I don't have anything else to say. I think I covered everything, announced where people can find us. So I think we're good. I brought everybody down. Now you bring us back up, Mike.
All right. Let's talk about some on the field football. Forget about this realignment nonsense. Forget about all the bad things that can happen. Only good things can happen on the football field. Other than losing, of course. But other than that, only good things can happen.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, first game we have our what's become a rite of passage, this Friday night game that we just have every week now, seemingly in the Big Ten. So it's fun. Friday, October 4th, we have the Michigan State Spartans going to Eugene to play the number 6 Oregon Ducks. This is an 8 p.m. game on Fox in Central Time, as always, as we say, God's time. And the line is Oregon by 24. So Sparty is reeling coming into this game after 2 straight losses. The first was a heartbreaker to Boston College, and the next a shellacking by Big Ten Goliath, Ohio State. And if that wasn't hard enough, now Michigan State has to play number 6 Oregon after a short week of practice. Oof. If Sparty wants to make this interesting, it has to find a way to move the ball consistently and keep Oregon's offense off the field. To me, that means you got to get Lynch Adams and Carter going in the running game. Both have had some success this year, although not a ton. Lynch Adams has been a little better in his carries than Carter, although the coaching staff clearly views them in equals in how many attempts each back gets. So they need to establish that run because QB Aiden Childs has thrown a ton of picks. He's got 5 TDs and 8 interceptions. Yikes. That's not the ratio you want. That's not going to win a lot of games in the Big Ten. Childs needs to limit the mistakes and stop throwing, as you say, the YOLO shots up for grabs all the time. Against Oregon's athletic DBs, that's just not going to work. So you got to make good decisions with the ball to have any chance. You got to find Nick Marsh and Montori Foster in the passing game a little more consistently. I think this could be a big game for tight end Jack Velling also, to look for him on third down when they're focusing on those receivers. Sparty's D so far this year, positive, giving up 3.3 yards per rush. That's pretty solid. And they will need to keep that up against Oregon as the Ducks have been somewhat one-dimensional. It will be up to Sparty to stop that run and make Oregon fully one-dimensional so that Spartan pass rush can tee off on Dylan Gabriel and try to cause some havoc. And Oregon is surprisingly only averaging 3.5 yards per rush themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a place where Sparty needs to excel at stopping that run, getting Oregon into second, third, and long, putting the pressure on Gabriel before he picks them apart. Yeah. The problem is that Oregon's throwing for over 300 yards a game. Sparty's 42nd in the country in passing yards allowed. So Sparty's been vulnerable to capable passing attacks, and I think Oregon's Dylan Gabriel is going to go ham in this game because Gabriel's having a season for the ages, and he may be a finalist for this year's Heisman Trophy. He's playing at that high level, completing nearly 82% of his passes for nearly 9 yards an attempt, 9 TDs, just 1 pick. He has taken 7 sacks. So Oregon's vulnerable to give up pressure on Gabriel. But I don't know. I just think he's going to have a field day throwing to wide receivers Tez Johnson, Trayshawn Holden, Evan Stewart, and tight end Terrence Ferguson. How do you see this game lining up, John?
Yeah, I think it's unfortunately going to look a lot like the Ohio State game. I think there's just too much talent on the Oregon side of the ball. Especially on the offense. The way Dylan, like you said, the way Dylan Gabriel is playing right now, and their wide receivers are coming down with everything, and the explosive plays all over is just going to be really tough. This Spartan defense, as much as I've seen, I think the groundwork of what Joe Rossi wants to do is there, or it's getting there. They don't have the guys. They don't have the guys to be able to execute it as well as I think he needs them to. And plus it's just new, to them, I think. And so it's going to take a while. Like we said at the beginning of the year, it's Sparty, Spartan fans, you got to just be patient. This is going to be tough. They're obviously you might be able to steal some wins here and there. But against teams like Ohio State or like Oregon, it's going to be really hard. You don't have the people yet. And also, as much as Aiden Childs is making a lot of mistakes, he's still a work in progress, and I think he'll get there. But right now, that ain't it. And some of these defenses, like I said, like Ohio State or like what you're probably going to see here with Oregon, they're able to capitalize on that and make him pay. And I think that's what's going to happen. I unfortunately don't see Michigan State being able to establish the run very well. We haven't been able to see that consistently. As much as I'm a fan of Lynch Adams and Nate Carter, it just hasn't been getting it done. That offensive line has just not been consistently run blocking for them and creating enough holes. So, having them, last week, Lynch Adams to only 35 yards to Nate Carter's 27. I think it's going to be a pretty similar game, and forcing Aiden Childs to throw the ball is as magical as he can be sometimes is what you want. Cause he's so accident prone or through throwing those interceptions. And so you keep him with happy feet, you make him make those mistakes, and you capitalize on it. And I think Oregon will do the same pretty much as what Ohio State was able to do.
Yeah. So what do you have for a score in this one?
I have the Oregon Ducks 42 to Michigan State 13.
That's funny. So I'm with you. I don't see how Sparty's going to score that many points against this Oregon D. And even if they score, can they score in bunches and often enough to keep pace with Oregon? Like, I don't think so. So I think this is going to be a blowout. So I have the Oregon Ducks 41, the Michigan State Spartans 13.
Oh, wow.
So we were 1 point off only on our prediction.
Wow.
Yeah. That is a little creepy when that happens.
Yeah.
It's like, we got to disagree more, John.
We do, but also, we see the games very similarly. Obviously.
Yeah, sometimes, but not always. We disagree about enough stuff.
That's true.
To make it interesting. There's always a few every week.
Yes.
I don't think the next one is going to be one of them.
Yeah.
All right. All the rest of these games are being played on Saturday, October 5th. So we have the UCLA Bruins going to Happy Valley to play the number 7 Penn State Nittany Lions. This is an 11 a.m. game on Fox. The line is Penn State by 28. So after winning a nail-biter against Hawaii to start the year, UCLA has been on the wrong end of 3 blowouts, courtesy of Indiana, LSU, and Oregon. The good news is they only lost to Oregon by 21. The bad news is they didn't manage a single offensive touchdown and scored just 6 offensive points for the game. Brutal. Even worse, starting QB Ethan Garbers is banged up and may not be able to play this week. So they definitely need him if they are going to have any chance of making this even remotely interesting. The running game has been totally non-existent this year for the Bruins, as their leading rusher, TJ Harden, has just 125 yards for the year on just 3 yards per carry. Can Ethan Garbers heal up enough to play this week and get his top receivers the ball in space? That's the question. Rico Flores has had his moments this year, but they need more out of playmakers like tight end Maliki Mataveo and wide receivers Quasi Gilmer and J. Michael Sturdivant. So the problem is that Penn State currently ranks 7th in the country in scoring D. And linebacker turned D end Abdul Carter is a one-man wrecking crew, just destroying opponents' dreams and game plans on a regular basis through a series of spectacular plays.
Yeah.
So this Penn State D is also just deep everywhere. And Tom Allen has them playing at an incredibly high level. I mean, they gave up just 7 points to Illinois all day. That's a dominant performance. I'm more curious, though, about the Penn State offense, which managed just 21 points against Illinois. That's abysmal considering the way the Penn State D dominated the game. So to me, they brought in Andy Kotelnicki to fix the offense in big games. And so far, Kotelnicki looked up to the challenge until they played a big game. And then it didn't work out nearly as well as they hoped. So how are you seeing this one, John?
I think this is going to, unfortunately for UCLA, reflect a lot of what Indiana was able to do to them. I do think that Kotelnicki might look really good in this game because UCLA's defense is going to just get totally destroyed. I think even by the running game and by the passing game.
Yeah.
And their inability, especially if Garbers is out, their inability to score, I think, at all. Maybe squeak in a field goal. But I just think that this is going to be a game where Kotelnicki might look a lot better, but I'm a little nervous, like you said, about whether or not these explosive plays that we've been waiting to see from Penn State are actually going to happen, because I still haven't seen it. Yeah, they look dominant on the field sometimes, and especially on the defensive side of the ball, but offensively, we're still seeing a lot of the same stuff we saw last year. And the lack of explosive plays, like they can beat you methodically, running the ball, throwing short passes here and there, dink and dunk on you. But nothing to me that is screaming, top tier or top of the Big Ten, like, or Ohio
I was
State.
shocked at how little success they had against Illinois.
It was bizarre, man. It really was
really strange.
And so that to me, it doesn't bode well. I guess in the long term, but in the short term for this game, they shouldn't have a problem. I think they'll roll pretty easily, but I don't think it's gonna be a highest scoring game is what you would think. I can see 28 absolutely, but I can also see 24. Just because, maybe they just don't have the ability to pass. To pass deep, and maybe UCLA's defense is able to keep them from having a successful passing game. But they're going to make it. They'll make their plays by running the ball, because they're both their running backs, I think, are just absolutely dominant, and they're rolling right now too. They're doing really well. So I see this game coming down to a totally dominant performance, but still somewhat disappointing if you're a Penn State fan for the lack of explosive plays, like you talked about. I see it 27-0.
Interesting. I think Penn State does a little better than that. I think Andy Kotelnicki, there's going to be a ton of pressure on him this week to make it look good. And I think he's going to make it look good. Not necessarily great all the time. I don't think it's going to be perfect. But I also think that UCLA is going to have so little success that they're going to be on short fields a lot. And so that could be a factor too. Fair point. I've got the Penn State Nittany Lions 38, the UCLA Bruins 7. I think, I'm not sure when or how they score, but I think they score at some point, probably in garbage time. But this Penn State D is going to be really dominant, and they're going to give that offense short fields. And I think they're going to capitalize off that. But will we see the explosive plays? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that is something I'm looking for and that you're looking for now. We want to see that Penn State offense create more explosive plays with Andy Kotelnicki for sure. Because otherwise, if they can't, then it's a James Franklin problem. It just is, because Andy Kotelnicki had no problems getting explosive plays. Mike Yurcich, before he was hired, had no problems creating explosive plays. Kirk Straka had no problems creating explosive plays until they came to Happy Valley.
Yep.
So if Kotelnicki isn't working out, I'm pointing the finger directly at the head guy.
Absolutely.
So, but I don't know, man. I just don't think UCLA has the horses to make this interesting on either side of the ball.
Yeah.
And if Garbers doesn't play, if Garbers plays scored. If Garbers doesn't play, this could get out of hand.
Yeah.
That could be like a 50 burger, because then they might not be able to get a first down,
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think it's just rough, man. For UCLA, dude. This is just their schedule is just it's not doing them any favors.
No, they're getting beat. They're getting beat down.
Yeah.
Well, West Coast teams, how are you liking it so far?
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have the Purdue Boilermakers going to Camp Randall to take on the Wisconsin Badgers. This is an 11 a.m. game on the Big Ten Network, and the line is Wisconsin by 14. So like UCLA, Purdue is reeling and desperately needs a better performance to feel like they're making any progress under second-year head coach Ryan Walters. Boilermakers have not been able to successfully replace Deion Burks at wide receiver or Nick Scorton at D end. That has been a huge problem for Purdue. After a season-opening win against FCS Indiana State, Purdue has gotten crushed 3 weeks in a row. They did play Nebraska competitively for 3 quarters last week, and I give them credit for that.
Yep.
But they still got blown out in the fourth quarter. And the offense is totally anemic. The offense has gotten so bad that Purdue fired offensive coordinator Graham Harrell after the Nebraska game. That is a desperate move to make in season. You wonder if play calling can be improved with a new inexperienced play caller, but I guess Ryan Walters felt like it couldn't get any worse. So here we are. And somehow, despite all of the bad stuff going on, Purdue QB Hudson Card is still completing 66% of his passes. That's the good news. The bad news is that his line can't protect him. He's been running for his life all year. He's averaging under 7 yards per attempt, which isn't good, and has 7 TDs to 4 picks. Worst of all, he's been sacked 10 times. This allegedly improved Boilermaker offensive line has struggled to protect Card all year. Devin Mockabee and Reggie Love had some success running the ball, but it hasn't been enough to make up for the anemic passing attack. And other than tight end Max Clare, Purdue doesn't have a single receiver over 100 yards for the year. That is an indictment of the offense, plain and simple. Wisconsin's had sort of a strange year so far too, John.
Yeah.
They were underwhelming against Western Michigan, South Dakota in wins. Then disaster struck as they got crushed by Alabama and also lost starting QB Tyler Van Dyke for the year. They had a bye week. Then they came out hot off the bye, dominated the first half against USC, leading 21-10 at half. But then USC won the second half 28-0, which kind of killed all the good vibes from the first half. So where does Wisconsin go from here? They're definitely utilizing a more run-heavy approach in the absence of Tyler Van Dyke, which makes sense. Can they get this offense humming against Purdue? Running backs Ches Malusi, Cade Yakimelli, Tawi Walker, they've been up and down. Yakimelli is probably the least effective-looking athlete of the three, but he has the best rushing stats somehow. It's all kind of weird, John.
Yeah.
And regardless of who totes it the most, Wisconsin needs all 3 of these guys going forward, as they will be a run-centric team. And they also need top wide receiver Will Pauling to bounce back, because he was shut down last week, and they can't have him be shut down like he was against USC if they're going to make anything happen this year. Mm-hmm. So what are you thinking about this game?
Well, I feel ever so slightly better about Purdue after last week's performance against a pretty decent Nebraska squad. So that, gives you some hope that there is a possibility to make it somewhat competitive, because Wisconsin is just not a great team this year. They're, I'm not saying they're bad, but they're not what we're used to seeing. And they've got problems and issues all over the place. in places that, again, not used to seeing, like the defensive line. So I think if Purdue can manage to get their run game going somehow, and I think it's possible, and maybe open up that pass for Hudson Card to be able to dink and dunk here and there, it can make a competitive game. I do think Wisconsin still has the edge. I think they do have more talent overall than Purdue does at this time. They're still good enough on the offensive line and can protect Braden Locke a lot better and give him a chance to throw the ball, even though he's not playing particularly well. I think that they can do that. And I think having these three running backs, if they're healthy, are effective when need be. So if it wasn't for the fact that, that Purdue looks like garbage all over the field in multiple areas, and I'm sorry, like I know they were able to look somewhat decent and hold on against Nebraska for a while, but
when the dam broke, the dam broke.
It exactly, and so Wisconsin's going to be paying attention to that, and I think they're going to figure it out, and I think Wisconsin is going to win this pretty handily. I do think that Purdue will probably score early, maybe a couple times. Before Wisconsin figures it out and they're able to shut them down, because Wisconsin's pass rush has been doing well. They're not good at stopping the run, but I think they're pretty good at that harassing the quarterback and getting to the quarterback from time to time too. So, which doesn't seem to be very difficult on this Purdue against this.
Not against Purdue. No, it seems like it's a revolving door, turnstiles on your way to Hudson Card. So that's tough for him.
Yep. So I'm seeing this game. Wisconsin 30, Purdue 13.
Okay.
I wanted to say 14. I wanted to say 2 touchdowns, but I can't. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I don't see them getting 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I just think that Purdue's not going to be able to do much offensively. I think Wisconsin's going to get a ton of snaps.
Yeah.
And I think getting all those snaps will get the run game into a rhythm. And I think Wisconsin will ride that run game to a big win over the Boilermakers.
Yeah.
So I've got the Wisconsin Badgers 34, the Purdue Boilermakers 10.
Okay.
All right, moving along. We've got a big game. The Iowa Hawkeyes going to Columbus to take on the number 3 Ohio State Buckeyes. This is a 2:30 p.m. game on CBS. So cue the trumpets. And the line is Ohio State by 20.5. So the good news for Iowa is that they're having a solid year. Caleb Johnson is an absolute menace at running back, averaging over 8 yards per carry, which is just stupid this far into the season. This guy's the best Hawkeye running back since Sean Green, full stop. I mean, he's incredible. He's a special, and he should be a high draft whenever he comes out. And being as he's a junior, I encourage him to go to the NFL this year.
Do it. You'll do great. You'll
be great, and we'll be cheering for you, buddy.
Absolutely.
We will. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So yes, we hope that Caleb Johnson is on the short track to the NFL, but he's great. And I also like that he claims I don't know if it's true or not, but he claims that he's from Ohio State, but would never have gone to Ohio State because his goal was to beat Ohio State, not be Ohio State. So you got to respect that as a competitor.
Okay.
That he came right out and said that. He's like, I didn't want to be a Buckeye anyway.
All right. Okay.
The other good news for Iowa is that they rank 15th in the country in scoring D. So they've been very good defensively as usual. Now the bad news. Iowa's passing offense is almost non-existent. Cade McNamara has yet to eclipse 600 yards for the year, and his yards per attempt are a paltry 5.8. Not good. He's thrown 3 TDs to 2 picks, so he's not being very explosive. And Iowa's doing whatever they can to rely on their running game and not make Cade's win games, because Cade hasn't shown the ability to go out there and win games for his team like he did when he was at Michigan. The Michigan Cade McNamara seems to be gone. And Iowa doesn't have a top receiving option outside of tight end Luke Lachey. So that makes it a big problem also, because the other bad news is that Ohio State's offense is electric, but their defense is number 1 in the country in scoring D. That is wild. Mm-hmm. I know they haven't played anybody good, but that's still crazy. Number 3 Buckeyes have been absolutely on fire, and their embarrassment of riches at the skill positions are paying dividends as the Buckeyes are just overwhelming teams with talent. Will Howard at quarterback has been as good as advertised, maybe even better. completing 69% of his passes for nearly 10 yards per attempt, 8 TDs, and 2 picks. And his O-line's playing great in front of him as he's rarely under pressure back there. Running backs Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson do whatever they want, basically. And Frosh phenom Jeremiah Smith is so good at wide receiver that preseason All-American Emeka Egbuka is not the first guy we're talking about each week. And that's crazy because Emeka Egbuka is fantastic. He's great.
Mm-hmm.
He'll be a first-round draft pick in the NFL. But Jeremiah Smith is just different, and it's crazy to watch. And Carnell Tate's having a nice year as well as the third wide receiver. So on D, the Buckeyes are probably even better than they are on offense, maybe. This Jim Knowles D is terrorizing teams and dominating. I am so excited to watch them against Iowa because the Iowa rushing attack is the biggest challenge Ohio State has had to date. So I'm curious if they shut Brown down or if he has a bunch of success like he's had against everybody else. That's something I'll be watching very closely in this game because that might say something about what's going to happen down the road when Ohio State plays, a team like Alabama that likes to run the ball or a Georgia or something like that. So that'll be, and of course, Michigan. So yeah, I'm psyched about this game. John, how are you seeing this one?
Yeah, I'm excited about it too. And yes, I think Caleb Johnson is going to be a test for this Buckeyes defense. The problem is that this is going to be really the only test for this Buckeyes defense. I don't think they have to worry about Cade McNamara in that passing game at all. I really don't. I don't think that's going to be a threat. I don't think they see it as a threat. They're going to be keying on Caleb Johnson the entire game, and I think they're going to be able to shut him down pretty handily because there's just going to be nothing else they can do to really move the ball consistently, at least not in the way that they're going to have to against this vaunted Ohio State defense. And then on the flip side, as good as Iowa's defense is, they're obviously excellent at stopping the run. And so they might be able to limit Judkins and Henderson, a bit. But their secondary is not, it's still good, but it's not what it was last year.
No.
There's no Cooper DeJean back there. There are solid players, but there's no star. And when you're dealing with wide receivers as good as Jeremiah Smith and Mbuka and it's just, you're going to get overwhelmed real quick. And I think that Ohio State, it might be a little close. Maybe that first half, I think Iowa's defense will keep them in the game well enough, and maybe Caleb Johnson can, bust off a few big runs. But I think the absolute lack of passing game and the weakness, with their DBs is going to, basically make this, put an end to Iowa's run. And I think Ohio State in the second half is just going to absolutely take it to them and probably annihilate them. So what you got to hope to if you're Iowa, in my opinion, is you just hope Caleb Johnson stays healthy. He is your offense. And so hopefully he can stay healthy through this game against that terrifying Buckeye defense, because he will get hit a lot in this game. He's going to, because that's all you're going to be able to do is run the ball with Caleb Johnson to try to make anything happen. So I'm seeing Ohio State inevitably run away with this. I see Ohio State 38, Iowa Hawkeyes 10.
I think Iowa's going to keep it close for I don't know, most of the first and most of the second quarter.
Yeah.
And then I think somebody's going to get loose before halftime for a long touchdown. And I think in the second half, it's going to be all Buckeyes.
Yep.
So I have got the Ohio State Buckeyes 38, the Iowa Hawkeyes 13.
Okay. Dang.
We're close so far today.
We are real close today.
Real close.
Okay.
It's interesting. We'll see if we're both right or if we're both fools.
Yeah.
Excited. Keep
listening
to find out. All right, next up, we have number 23, Indiana, going to Evanston to take on the Northwestern Wildcats. So this is a 2:30 p.m. game on the Big Ten Network, and the line is Hoosiers by 14. So it was a September to remember for the Indiana Hoosiers, John. Not only are they 5-0, that the games haven't even been close. And yeah, you can say Indiana hasn't played anybody good, but all I know is they just dominated Maryland despite turning the ball over 4 times. So this is a Hoosier squad that's clicking on all cylinders. And so far, the defense has exceeded my expectations, but the offense has been sublime. And it's been sublime for a couple of reasons. I think number one reason is Curtis Rourke is a star at quarterback, completing 73% of his passes for a gaudy 10.8 yards per attempt, 11 TDs, just 2 picks. He's been nothing short of spectacular. But I also got to give credit to his receivers, especially Elijah Surratt, man. Elijah Surratt is quite simply one of the best receivers in the Big Ten. Omar Cooper is a great second banana. And then Miles Price and Miles Cross have also been effective. So effective that last year's star wide receiver, Donovan McCulley, just hit the transfer portal because there's no room for him anymore.
PJ Fleck. Calling
Seriously.
PJ Fleck.
Yeah, PJ,
Call
get in
Donovan
on
McCulley.
it. But that's wild, dude, because Donovan McCulley is a legit Big Ten wide receiver, and he can't even get playing time anymore because Indiana upgraded so much at wide receiver. How did Cignetti find that many good receivers? Like, how did he do it in one offseason starting a job? Dude is an absolute roster building wizard. He just is.
Yep.
Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton have been solid running the ball, but it'll be interesting to see if Indiana is able to run the ball against better competition. Now, however, that better competition will have to come in a future week because Northwestern is really struggling this year. And along with Purdue and UCLA, those are the 3 worst teams in the Big Ten, in my opinion. So Northwestern can't run the ball, nor can they throw the ball. Quarterback Jack Lausch is completing just 48% of his passes for 4.8 yards per attempt. That's terrible. I mean, that's as bad as it gets. He's thrown 2 TDs and 2 picks. So not much going in the passing game. And Cam Porter has had a couple moments, but he's been far from the force it would take him to be to make up for a lack of passing game. Northwestern only matched 5 points against Washington last week. That's abysmal. I think this is a statement game for Indiana. I think Northwestern can't do anything. Well, Indiana will run through this Northwestern squad like a hot knife through butter. So what do you think about this one, John?
I agree. I mean, look, Washington was able to put up, Will Rogers was able to put up 223 yards and 2 TDs last week. And I think Curtis Rourke, as good as Washington, as their receivers are, I think, and Will Rogers is, I think Indiana has more weapons at wide receiver.
They do? They absolutely do.
So I think that this is going to be an absolute shellacking. I think it's going to get ugly quick. And Indiana is just and Curtis Rourke are going to just pick them apart. I don't see the Wildcats getting really anything going. Maybe they'll get a lucky bounce here and there, but unfortunately, their offense is just totally inept and can't really do much of anything. And they don't have a quarterback. They just don't. No. Mike Wright was not it. Jack Lausch does not seem to be it. No. So they have no other option as far as I'm aware of. So it's going to be a long, painful season for Wildcats fans. And I see Indiana just continuing to roll. And the first time being 6-0 since, what did you say, the 60s or 70s? 60s.
Yeah.
Wild.
I think they went to the Rose Bowl, I want to say, in like 67 or something.
Okay.
There's a 3-way tie that year. I think it was Indiana, Purdue, and Minnesota. And I think Indiana got to go because they hadn't been in the longest time or something at the point. I want to say. Now, I could be misremembering that.
Yeah.
That's just off the top of the dome. But yeah, man, it's heady times in Bloomington.
Yeah. Honestly, I can see this getting really ugly. And I'm going to make a wild prediction here. And I'm going to say Indiana 56 to Northwestern's 6.
Wow. Interesting.
I think it's going to be destruction, annihilation.
No, I'm with you. I think it's also going to be ugly. I don't have it quite as ugly as you just because I think at a certain point, Cignetti calls off the dogs. But I've got the Indiana Hoosiers 45, Northwestern Wildcats 7. I do think Northwestern scores, and I predict that Curt Cignetti's really pissed about it. And then when he's interviewed, he brings it up even if they're ahead by 4 touchdowns. And he's like, oh, we shouldn't have given up that touchdown. Because that's
I
just
love
the kind
this
of guy he
man.
is. No, I love him too, man. Dude, okay, no, I don't want to. Here's my only thing with Cignetti. Is he too successful? Is it a thing where I know ADs usually don't like hiring older coaches, man, but if he wins enough games, they might make an exception. Because nobody had this on their bingo card. Indiana having a year for the ages.
No.
Now, I hope Cignetti stays in Bloomington until he retires. I do. I hope so. I think he's great for the program. Like, good for him.
He's great for the Big Ten.
He's great for the Big Ten. He could be there for the next 10, 15 years.
Yep.
You know? But if he keeps winning like this, eventually, and dude, I'm not even just talking college jobs. If he keeps winning like this, you could see the NFL sniffing around.
Oh, yeah.
And being
absolutely.
like, what does this guy know? What does he have figured out? You know? And I keep coming back to the fact that Curt Cignetti was Nick Saban's recruiting director at the beginning of his Alabama dynasty. So he built the Saban dynasty. He knows how to get players that can play and just flat out put them in position to win.
It's amazing that it took him this long to become a head coach at a power conference program.
Especially because his dad was a coach. So he had pretty good hookups in the industry. So yeah, it is surprising it took him this long, but man, some guys are better because it took them that long.
Yeah.
You know, they're better coaches. They've been through the wars. You don't have to worry about them learning on the job. They've seen it all.
Yep.
You know, he's been a head coach for 15 years, something like that. And he's never had a losing season. How's that even possible? How's that even possible?
I don't know.
Dude, that's like Kalen DeBoer stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, so absolutely. I just wonder if are we going to start talking about Curt Cignetti the way we talk about Kalen DeBoer?
God, you got the Hoosiers, man. You guys are so freaking lucky, dude. I envy you guys. Let's just say that.
Openly jealous that you somehow plucked the best. I mean, like, good. You're overdue for it. So I'm happy for you.
Yes.
Happy for you.
Absolutely.
But also openly jealous that you pulled a guy who's just a coaching savant.
Yep.
And just managed to make, I mean, like, good for your AD, you know?
Yeah.
That's impressive stuff. All right. Moving on. We have another big game. The Rutgers Scarlet Knights going to Lincoln to take on the Nebraska Cornhuskers. It's a 3 p.m. game on FS1, and the line is Nebraska by 7, which is like a little higher line than I expected. I mean, it is at home. So I guess I get it. But anyway, John, Rutgers got a little lucky against Washington last week.
Yes, they did.
But they managed to win, and that's all that matters. This week, they have a tougher task, and they will need to play better than they did against Washington if they expect to upset Nebraska. That's just full stop. They're going to have to play. Rutgers is going to have to play their best game of the year if they're going to win this game. There's no mystery to what Rutgers wants to do. They want to pound you into submission with star running back, Kyle Monangai, and occasionally his second banana, Samuel Brown. But this is the Kyle Monangai show, and he's the straw that stirs the drink and makes the offense go. QB 8th and Calic Manis hasn't been great for Rutgers, but he's been good enough. He's completing over 61% of his passes, which is far better than what he managed last season. 7 yards per attempt only, but 7 TDs and 1 pick. So, yeah, he's had some of the DBs drop picks, but hey, 7 TDs to 1 pick is a TD to interception ratio Greg Schiano will take every time.
Yep.
Wide receivers Demir Miller, Ian Strong have been workmanlike, while tight end Kenny Fletcher is also a guy to watch. And then this is a game for, in my opinion, defensive backs like Robert Longerbeam and Flip Dixon to disguise coverages and make plays against this talented but relatively inexperienced Frosch signal caller for Nebraska and Dylan Raiola. So I would expect Rutgers to pull out the whole kitchen sink on defense and throw every look at Raiola they possibly can to try to confuse the freshman in any way possible and knock him off his game. So that's an X's and O's battle that I'll be interested to see if they're able to keep Raiola guessing or if he's going to be able to figure this defense out. Nebraska was shaky for almost 3 quarters before taking over against Purdue. They will want to have a much more consistent effort this week against the Scarlet Knights, or else they will be in danger of losing this game. Raiola's had his freshman moments, particularly in the loss against Illinois, But overall, he's been really good for a true Frosh, completing 70% of his passes for 8.6 yards per attempt, 9 TDs, just 2 picks. He has been sacked 8 times, which is something to watch in this game. Rutgers will want to stuff the Husker running game and try to make Raiola's Huskers totally dependent on the pass. Can they do that? I'm not sure. Nebraska's run game has been fairly tepid. If Rutgers is going to take control of this game, then they need to make Nebraska one-dimensional. That way they can set up blitzes and harass Raiola without worrying too much about getting gouged in the running game. So Nebraska will try to do the same thing. They want to take the ball out of Kyle Monungai's hands. They want to force Rutgers to beat them with Eighth and Kaliakmanis. John, these are two similar teams. How do you see this one shaping up?
Yeah, I think this is going to be an absolute battle.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a great game. I'm really excited. I think it's going to be smash mouth Big Ten football, and I'm really pumped for it. Two solid defenses, I think, and then offenses that I think prefer maybe. I mean, I know Raiola is doing really well, but I still think Matt Rule would like to have the running game going first before he even gets the pass game going. I think that's still his desire. Not that it's been happening that way, but I think that's what he likes to do is establish the run.
Right.
But here's the thing that I gotta look though at this Rutgers defense, which like we talked about in the last podcast about how it just seems like something's missing. Like they're just not quite as in sync as they used to be, or as they should be, or and maybe it's lack of leadership. And I think that if you don't have Longer Beam and Flip Dixon at the top of their game, and one of them taking over at the helm of making sure that defense is ready to go every single play, every down, that it could get ugly, because we saw what Washington was able to do and the numbers they were able to put up, and they were able
500 yards of offense.
It's crazy, yeah, and they were able to run the ball. Jonah Coleman had almost 150 yards.
Oh yeah, they were very balanced. They ran and threw all over this Rutgers defense, which shocked me.
Me too. So if they don't tighten up and get that together, this could be dangerous. And if Raiola limits the mistakes, I think it's going to favor Nebraska. I think it still favors Nebraska because they're at home. I do think it'll be close, but I don't know, man. I think Nebraska's defensive line has a better shot at bottling up Monungai, and I don't think their passing game is good enough to win this game alone. I know Kaliakmanis has done a lot better this year, but I don't think he's going to fare as well against this Nebraska Cornhusker defense. I think it's a dangerous game for Rutgers, and I can see this kind of maybe pulling away in the second half, maybe being close even through the third quarter, but at the fourth, I think Nebraska is able to just do enough and come away and maybe win by a touchdown.
All right, so what's your score?
I see Nebraska winning 24 to Rutgers 20. What? Did we do it again?
I have got the Nebraska Cornhuskers 24, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights 20.
Oh. I'm not, dude. We don't look at.
I don't talk about this. We don't talk about this ever.
Not at all.
We don't even discuss like our thoughts on. I mean, we discuss our thoughts on the games a little bit, but like we don't even tip our hats on like who we are going to pick or anything.
No, not even.
That's funny that we have the same score. I think it's going to be a thing where Nebraska feels like they can pull away, but I think Raiola is going to make some Frosh mistakes.
Sure.
I think there's going to be turnovers in this game for both teams. It's going to be a little ugly, and it's going to come down to the fact that I just think Nebraska has a little more balanced offense than Rutgers does. And I just can't trust the Rutgers D right now to make a play when they need it.
Yeah.
So that's why. So yeah, I think it's going to be close as you do. We both got it very close, but I do think Nebraska pulls this one out.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
All right. Next up, we'll see if we have the same score in this game. We might have to quit the podcast.
Yeah.
All right. We have the number 10 Michigan Wolverines visiting the Washington Huskies. This is a 6:30 p.m. game on NBC, the Big Ten Saturday night game. And the line is Washington by 2.5. So, John, this is the strangest line I've maybe ever seen. Certainly since we started doing the podcast, this is the strangest line I've ever seen. Michigan is a top 10 team. Washington just lost to Rutgers and Wazoo and had their kicker, who had been decent before, have a horrifying game, going 1 for 4 on field goals last week. Yikes. And maybe it's just one bad week, but maybe it's not, because that was really abysmal kicking. But how is Vegas? My first question with this game is, how is Vegas picking Washington to beat Michigan? And I'll tell you first what I think, then you tell me what you think.
Sure.
I think it comes down to the fact that the Huskies have been explosive offensively in both the running and passing game. Will Rogers is completing an absurd 75% of his passes for over 9 yards per attempt, 10 TDs, and 0 picks. Yowza. Those are good stats. On top of that, star running back Jonah Coleman's averaging over 7 yards per carry and has over 500 yards rushing so far. So he's been very effective. Yep. Denzel Boston, Giles Jackson are having nice years at receiver for Washington. By contrast, Michigan can't throw the ball. The Wolverines probably should have lost to the Golden Gophers last week, and their offense is totally dependent on the running game.
Yep.
Alex Orji is completing just over 55% of his passes, and even on his completions, John, his ball placement is poor. I mean, his receivers are doing him favors. They're making all these acrobatic catches on what should be routine plays, and he's just not a Big Ten level passer, period. Full stop.
Yep.
Luckily, Khalil Mullings has been a machine, which is made up for the fact that the enigma that is Donovan Edwards is a man that has no consistency to his game in Edwards. But Mullings does, and he's been consistent, and that's why he's become the bell cow back for the Wolverines. But they need 2 backs with as much as they run the ball. So they need Edwards to play better consistently and not just show up when he wants to. Colston Loveland is a weapon at tight end, but Orji can't really get the ball to him, and none of the other receivers are getting open enough to begin with. So how are you seeing this one, John? Like, what's jumping out to you about this game?
I mean, I actually agree with Vegas, man, for the reasons that you already said. I really do. I think the fact that I know that they lost that game, but the numbers don't lie. The stats, like with what Will Rogers and Jonah Coleman have been able to do against a solid Rutgers defense, and how Washington's defense limited Cali McManus to only 115 yards and Kyle Monangai to 132, which is a good day, but still less than, I guess, I didn't expect him to have less than Jonah Coleman at the end of the day.
No, certainly not.
So this Washington Huskies offense is much better than I was expecting them to be. I think their defense is definitely has holes, but mainly where I see those problems are in the secondary. But since Michigan can't throw the ball, I'm not too worried about it.
Right.
So, yeah, I can see Washington winning this game. Absolutely. I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but because I think Michigan's defense, and especially at their D line, they're exceptional. But I just think Washington has more offensive power, and I think they're going to be able to pull this out. I really do.
Wow.
Yeah, I see the upset, and I think it's going to be a little payback too from last year. I think they're motivated from the national title game. And plus Washington wants to make a statement and, really show that they think that they belong amongst the, the bigger, schools within the conference.
I didn't even think about the rematch aspect of the national title game until now. That is interesting.
Yeah. I think there's a lot on the line for Washington, a lot of pride.
Yeah.
And especially for guys like Jonah Coleman. So I'm picking Washington to win 27 to Michigan's 17.
Okay. That's interesting. You might think that I'd agree with you and that I would pick Washington because they have a better and more diverse offense compared to Michigan's. But John, this is the Big Ten. And line of scrimmage play is king. And Michigan not only has, they are far better on both lines of scrimmage than Washington is.
That is true.
And Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant are going to eat on Saturday. And you think that Sharon Moore isn't going to them talking about how Vegas is favoring Washington? You don't think that's up in their locker room, they're talking about it all week, how they're being disrespected as the reigning national champions, and they've only lost to Texas and beat everybody else, but somehow they're getting disrespected. This team that just showed up in the Big Ten 5 minutes ago is gonna beat them. No, no way. So I think Michigan. I think Khalil Mullings is gonna have 200 yards rushing. I think Donovan Edwards might even show up for this game because it is a night game, you know. So Donovan Edwards might be motivated for once, and I think he gets over 100 yards too. And I think Michigan goes ballistic on the ground. And I also don't think Jonah Coleman's going to run the ball very well against them. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're going to open up gaps for them. That's going to make Washington one-dimensional. And then it's going to be that Michigan D-line teeing off on Will Rogers. And we both know Will Rogers is not the kind of athlete that can escape a pass rush.
That's true.
Not really. So but this is funny. This is where it gets funny. I have the Michigan Wolverines 27, the Washington Huskies 16. So we picked different teams this time, but we have almost the same score.
That's dude.
Well, at least we picked different teams.
That's true. Okay, so there you go, people.
But it is a little spooky that we picked almost the same score.
It is very spooky. Absolutely, yeah. I think it'll be fun, man. I could see it going both ways. Absolutely. But it'll be fun either way. I'm looking forward to this one a lot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think, it'll be. I won't be able to watch it in real time, but I think that's gonna be what I'm like when I go home. If no one tells me what happened after the USC Minnesota game, and I go home afterwards, I'm gonna be like trying to pull myself awake to go back and watch that game. That's totally what I'm gonna be doing.
Yeah.
Unless they spoil it for us with the Big Ten look-in, which they might.
Which is possible.
Is possible they'll do it. Because you're going to that game as well.
Yeah, I'll be at the OC game. Yep.
All right.
I'll be there.
Well, speaking of, John, we have a nice segue there.
Perfect.
Because our last game of the night features the number 11 USC Trojans going to Dinkytown to take on the Minnesota Golden Gophers at the Bank. This is a 6:30 p.m. game on the Big Ten Network. The line is USC by 8. So Vegas thinks this is a one-score game, which is fascinating to me. USC is rounding into form after routing the Badgers in the second half 28-0. This is a team that feels like it should be undefeated after they narrowly lost to Michigan a couple weeks ago. The Trojans are in a position to contend for the college football playoff if they keep winning, so they cannot afford a letdown game here. Despite trailing 21-10 at the break, USC came out and blew the doors off the Badgers in the second half, 28-0, as I said. USC's size and talent at receiver is crazy. It's crazy. It's the only team that's more talented at receiver is Ohio State.
Yeah.
Jacoby Lane is great. Zachariah Branch is one of the most dangerous players in America with his speed and agility. Kyron Hudson and Deuce Robinson are big physical targets for star QB Miller Moss. I mean, dude, Deuce Robinson is 6'6". I mean, that's huge. That's a huge wide receiver. What are you even doing? What are you even supposed to do covering him down in the red zone? Like, good luck. Time your jump really well.
Yeah.
Like, make sure, because you're going to have to be at the high point when he's, whatever. Anyway. Moss got banged up and had to go through concussion protocol before returning in the fourth quarter, so that's something to keep an eye on. He's been beat up and hit a lot the past couple of weeks, as USC has not run the ball very well, which has led to opposing teams teeing off on Miller Moss and that Trojans passing attack. The Trojans aren't running the ball well enough with Woody Marks to scare anybody, so people are playing the USC run game with a light box and focusing on slowing down those crazy receivers. So far, nobody other than Michigan has been able to slow them down at all. Can Minnesota slow them down? Some of that depends on whether star cornerback Justin Wally plays. He and Ethan Robinson are a great tandem at cornerback, but without Wally, you're not the same playmaking wise in coverage, I don't think. Yeah. So they need Wally back for this game, and the rumor is on the Gopher boards, according to Gopher insider Ryan Burns, the rumor is that Wally is a game time decision this week, like truly a game time decision. So they probably don't know right now if he's going to be able to play or not. And we'll see how he heals the next couple days. So really hope he plays. That would make, I think, for a more competitive game. For Minnesota, the question is, can they run the ball at all against this Trojan front? And can Max Brosmer hit enough explosive plays in the passing game to keep up with this USC attack? So how do you see this one shaping up, John?
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, Minnesota's really going to need Justin Wally back. I think that Minnesota, as far as depth in their DBs, is actually okay and could be all right without Wally, but having him there and having a leader in your backfield like that and someone with that much experience is just always obviously incredibly helpful. So,
and he and Robinson are both ball hawks.
Oh,
I mean, they both will go get interceptions. And I like Zaquan Bryan in coverage, but he's not a guy who's going to go just get you an interception when you need it.
Yeah.
Justin Wally is a guy who has repeatedly throughout his career gone out and got you interceptions when you needed them.
Yeah. I mean, even when they've been thrown right at Zaquan Bryan, he still doesn't come down with it. So, yeah, that's frustrating. Got to do that, buddy. But yeah.
Jug machine work, buddy. Jug machine work.
But, it really is like Minnesota's got to get the running game going. And I do think that this is probably their best chance against this USC defensive line to get that going. They've been facing Minnesota has been facing off against two of probably the best defensive lines in the Big Ten, at least top three, I would have to say. At stopping the run. So this is a chance, I think, for Darius Taylor, Marcus Major. I don't know if Mangum. I think Mangum got dinged up in the last game, but he looked good that one round. But
he did.
But if we can get that going to help Max Brosmer, I think that would work in the Gophers' favor, obviously, to help balance them out a little bit. But also, we need Minnesota needs their receivers to come down with the ball. They are number one in drops, I think, in the Big Ten. It is not Max Brosmer's fault. No. It is our receiver.
Brosmer still has a really high completion percentage, even I think he's still close to 70%, even with all the drops.
Yeah.
And his receivers are not helping him out. They are leading the Big Ten in drops.
Exactly. So that is incredibly frustrating. If they can fix that, if they can come down with the ball, and if the offensive line can block well enough to give our running backs some space to do what they do, especially Darius Taylor, this could be a really competitive game. The other part of it of Minnesota possibly be able to win is to continue to put pressure on Miller Moss. He has been beat up. And he has been on his backside so much the last 2 weeks. And I think if Heatherman can continue to get some good blitzes on him and knock him around, and wear him down in that first half, I think there's a chance. That being said, USC's passing game is outstanding especially when Miller Moss is given time in the pocket. Terrifying. So if Minnesota can't do that, can't keep harassing him the entire game and getting in the backfield, then it's going to be a long day and it's going to be painful to watch because Miller Moss will get his and those receivers will get theirs. And they will score points no matter what. It's just how much can Minnesota wear them down, and is their defense going to live on the field the entire game?
Yeah.
I'm not terribly afraid of USC's running game. I think we'll be able to stop them. I think Minnesota's defensive line is going to do just fine. They did actually pretty well last week against Mullings. All things being said, they did pretty good.
Absolutely.
So I feel good about that. But again, if you can take Miller Moss out of the game and you can outlast those wide receivers, I think Minnesota has a chance. But I do think USC I just haven't seen it from Minnesota at this point. So I have to, by default, pick USC to win this game. I think it'll be close, probably 3 quarters. I hope, if Minnesota shows up for more than 1 or 2 quarters, like we've been asking them to, I think it'll be close for a while. But like I said, if we can't, I'm going to assume that we can't totally stop Miller Moss, and he's going to make something happen because the guy's magic. And
he's really good.
I think they pull away in the fourth quarter, maybe by a couple scores, and put it away for the Trojans. But the Gophers put up a valiant effort. So I see USC winning this game 28 to the Gophers 20.
Okay, so exactly as Vegas. You think it's an 8-point game?
I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think if Minnesota is going to have a chance to win this game, they're going to have to get out to an early lead like Wisconsin did.
Mm-hmm.
They got to win the turnover battle for the day. And they got to plant Miller Moss on his butt so many times that he starts not to second guess himself and not play as well.
Yeah.
Now, that's possible. And I won't be shocked at all if Minnesota pulls that off Saturday night and wins the upset in front of a rabid home crowd at the bank. I do think Minnesota should be able to run the ball a little better, and I do think Minnesota should be able to stop the run. And if they can run the ball a little better, that can open up the offense. I think this can be a really competitive game. I think the Gophers come out hot in front of a home crowd that should be well lubricated and ready to go for a 6:30 start. I think especially after Minnesota, basically had Michigan all but beat last week. I think that'll probably juice the crowd a little bit and make people a little more enthusiastic than they would have been if Minnesota had gotten blasted by Michigan. So I think it'll be a pretty good crowd. I think Max Brosmer comes out and plays well and does a lot of really good things. USC has so much firepower.
Yep.
They have so many playmakers. So I can pick Minnesota to beat USC for a half or maybe even 3/4. But in my heart of hearts, I think USC's speed and talent will eventually be too much for a Minnesota team that just hasn't put together 60 minutes of football yet this year.
Yep.
I think they will eventually. I think they'll get there. I just don't think it's going to happen against USC.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got the USC Trojans 34, the Minnesota Golden Gophers 24.
Okay. Yep.
But I hope I'm wrong.
Me too.
That would be a lot of fun. It'd be a lot of fun to come back to this podcast and find out, we're due. This has been kind of a chalky season. Like, we're kind of due for some upsets in the Big Ten.
Well, Minnesota's due for finally winning against a P4 team.
Yeah.
Seriously.
When they play well.
And as we saw in the fourth quarter of last week, it's freaking possible, as we saw against
third
the first,
and fourth. I think they started to play well in the third quarter.
Well, and also as we saw in the first half against Iowa and again, and for part of the game against UNC, like it's not the lack of talent. It's just consistent play and execution, man. Come on.
Yep. And it's time to put together a full game.
Yeah.
So I would really like to see the Gophers take this down and have a chance to win in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
That would show me that this team is, on a good path. There are no moral victories in college football. There are only W's and L's. So, but you also can't guarantee a win. All you can guarantee is, will your team have a chance to win? Yep. So I would like to see that PJ Fleck puts this team in a position to win in the fourth quarter this weekend. And if they don't, it's going to be frustrating. And if they don't, the Gophers are 2-4. At that point, they have to get really hot just to make a bowl game.
Yeah.
So this is a big game. It's a big game for both teams.
Yep.
Both teams, because USC could legit make that college football playoff.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is a classic game where USC in the past, without Lincoln Riley, would trip over its own junk and just, trip over its dick and face plant. So is the USC different now with Lincoln Riley, or are they still the program that will trip over its own dick and face plant when they shouldn't? I don't know. We're going to find out. We
are. That's true. I'm excited.
Yes, me too. We got a big slate of games in the Big Ten this weekend, and it's always fun to go attend a game in person. So, yeah, I'm pumped. And, John, we got through all the games for the week.
We did. Yeah, it's great. This was fun. Again, sorry for starting it off all bad and negative, but, just stuff we got to touch on.
We got there. We got to the on-the-field stuff. That's what
we did. And this is good. There's a lot of fun games. Again, man, like this is the Big Ten. Every week is a great week. I don't care what anyone says about any other point in time of the game or any game, frankly. Even the games that are blowouts, it's fun to watch and kind of try to find something that's interesting and see where teams have improved. Even the ones that are winning by a lot, you got to see, there's fun things to look out for. So That being said, thanks again. We're glad you're here. If you want to find We Live for Saturday, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, and Podcast Addict. You can find us on Twitter at We Live for B1GSat. You can find Mike at Alibaba26, and you can find me, John, at Norwegian Gopher. And you can also email us, We Live for Saturday, B1G at gmail.com. Please like and follow and review and all that good stuff.
Yes, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Even if you're an audio only listener, we do appreciate it. So thank you so much for getting through, for rocking through another episode of We Live for Saturday. And we are excited to come back after all the smoke clears on Monday and talk about what happened in all the games this weekend. All right. Have a great weekend of college football, and I hope your team wins.